All right, all right. No matter who you are or where you are on your spiritual journey, you are. So I don't want to waste any of our time today, so let's begin as we do in silence in ordinary life. And whether you are here in person or online, I'm glad you're here for this presentation today. So let us enter a period of silence. May grace be in our heads and in our thinking. May grace be in our eyes and in our seeing. May grace be in our ears and in our hearing. May grace be in the mouth of Jim Bankston and myself today as we speak. May grace be in our hearts and in our understanding. May grace be at our ends and at our departing. May we all grow in patience, tolerance, love, and understanding. And as a result of what we do here today, may all beings everywhere benefit. Amen. Okay. I have a tendency, as you know, to give very long introductions to teachings I offer in here. My wife one time said that if I was building a average size house, the front porch would be 4 acres big. I'm not going to do that today. I've asked Dr. Jim Bankston, Pastor Emeritus of St. Paul's, to come and join me. And we're going to talk about this topic.
Did you know?
And I don't know, I told Jim when we first had this idea that when I was a teenager, teenage boys would get their father's car and drive it way too fast. And so the father would sometimes put a thing on the car called a governor to keep it from going fast, and I looked to him as my governor, just to kind of calm me down and to keep me from going off the rails. But what I said in here last week and have said before, that what I'm interested in doing is this, and that is, what does it mean to be a person of faith in this time, and what in this particular time does it mean to be a person of faith? And I shared this with Jim. I found this graphic that to me speaks to what we are attempting to do today. Now, the bullfighter represents Jim and me. The bull represents you, what's going on in the world. The bullfighter raises a red thing, cape, and it ends up like this. That's what we're hoping for. So this thing of being a person of faith in this time and being in this time a person of faith is my version of what Carl meant by preaching with the Bible in one hand and the newspaper in the other. So before we jump into this, do you want to leave?
No, I'm ready. No. So.
You want to say anything?
Yes. I would say that our topic today of the politics and the church is obviously complicated, lots of different perspectives on things. There'll be some of you at the end of this time thinking, well, I wish they'd have said more, and others will say, I wish they'd have said less. And so I hope Bill opened the class today with a reference to grace, so give us a little grace. But at the same time, I do think it's an important conversation for us to have and for people of faith to have, especially in our world today. So it is an opportunity for us to demonstrate what it would be like to have a conversation around controversial issues. Issues that are impactful for our community and for lots of individual lives. So we may not get it all right from your perspective, but the larger picture of having the conversation, I think, is significant. So I hope that's what you'll see and hear today, and that's what we're going to try to do. I have some other remarks, but I'll work them into my answers.
In January of 2016, Donald Trump said, I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and it would be okay with I would not lose any supporters. And since January of 2016 until today, some people, like people in the New York Times and others, have kept up with the dishonesty that has come out of the administration. We attempt to follow somebody who said, "Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." So how does the church deal with what seems to be so obvious instances, so many obvious instances of not truth-telling?
Yeah. Well, when I was a little boy, my mother was a great influence on my life, and she used to have these little bits of wisdom. I don't know where she got them. She was not an educated person. Neither of my parents were educated people, but they were relatively smart and self-educated and had done well in life. One of the things my mother said, I realized she was not the first one to say this, I'm not sure who was, but she said to me, the first casualty of war is the truth. So it's very difficult to have conversations when you can't agree upon what is true and what is factual. I think one of the places where the church can have an influence, as you say, as we follow the one who is the truth, is to encourage and demand, really, that our political leaders of whatever stripe, whatever position, tell us the truth. And it ought to be a basic place that we could start, that we have that voice in the marketplace of thought and ideas out there, in the political landscape, if you will. So one of the places I think we can have an influence is simply to ask of our leaders that they tell us the truth. It's a place to begin.
You know that there was a senator who was handcuffed in a meeting in California, and the press said that he didn't identify himself and rushed the stage and was a troublemaker. And it is on video that he did identify himself. And nobody in the press has said, or very few people have said, this is what is really going on. And that's concerning when our press is not telling us this is what factually happened.
Yeah. Well, we live in an age where truth can be verified.
Right.
To some extent, in terms of all the videos that are out there, and you can't do anything these days without it being on camera. So we all need to be careful. But yeah, so we have a way of verifying the truth. At least what our eyes tell us is the truth. So it's an advantage, I think, to have the opportunity to have things videoed so that we can make up our own minds about what's going on in a situation.
Okay. So most of the, I want to come back to the media in a minute because I have some facts and figures on that, but this leads into the fact that most of the people who are ardent supporters of a far-right position are those that we would call young, disaffected white males. And I don't know if it's possible to talk to these people or not, but Jesus' ministry was to those who felt that they were the dispossessed, the outcast. And people in this demographic feel that way. They experience that way. They feel that they don't have a fair shot at the future, that they are, the big word that they like to use is being replaced. What is the ministry of the church? And is it possible for us to have a ministry to people who feel so angry at the system and so disaffected? Can the bull sit down and have tea with these people?
Yeah. Well, I certainly hope so. Try to understand things sociologically and not only theologically. So we live in a fast-changing world. That's not a radical statement to make, but from the world in which many of us remember, basically more monolithic, biracial, with everyone knowing their place in that kind of world, to a world that has been just kind of exploded into lots of different perspectives, lots of different religions, lots of different races, languages, cultures, lifestyles, all a part of our United States now. And we're trying to make that work. Perhaps more than any other nation on earth, we are trying to make that work. And for those who remember the way it used to be and long for those days, we should be able to have a conversation to help ferret out what are the concerns there. What is legitimate about reclaiming some things in the past, and what is it that we do need to move on from? But I would think conversations with anyone who is feeling outside of the mainstream for whatever reason is a legitimate work of the church. So I have relatives. My home is in East Texas, and so lots of my, I won't say my wife's relatives. She's here somewhere today. She would agree with that. Would kind of fall into the category of what you're talking about. And I'm going to tell you, the conversations are difficult. This particular President Trump, whatever else you say, and I really want to be fair today, but I think it is a fair statement to say he's a polarizing figure. You can feel strongly one way or the other, very strongly and very emotionally invested in the political realities that we're facing today. So conversations are difficult. But if you can't have conversations in family and in church, then where else do those conversations happen except in groups where people all agree with each other? So somehow beginning to have that conversation with some of my wife's nephews is, I think, a legitimate extension of ministry today, whether you're ordained or not. So can we have that conversation? Should we? Absolutely, we should have that conversation with many people who feel left out of the system today. However illegitimate that may be to some of our eyes, what you feel is reality, for you at least. So I'm going to advocate for conversations and listening to others and encouraging people to have an opportunity to talk back and forth.
So one of the practical things that I would say, if people are interested in knowing what they can do, is to try to get diverse groups together for a meal. Yeah. That's what Jesus did. And the meal wasn't about changing anybody. Jesus at meals never tried to get anybody to be other than who they were. They ate together and they talked together and about life together. I do have some facts. There are facts like if you eat or consume cyanide, it will kill you. That's a fact. There are other facts that people see and they dispute. And we even, shortly after the first election of Trump after 2016, a phrase got introduced into the culture called alternative facts, so that people could look at something and see, well, I have different facts about what you're seeing, which really creates some cognitive dissonance. I found something on a site called Media Matters that says of the 320 online shows covering politics across all platforms, 191 of them are right-leaning. Those shows today have 480.6 million followers, which is 5 times as many as those on the left. So that gives you an idea of what's happening in terms of information dissemination that is taking place. And all of this gets more complicated when we take into consideration what I just said about facts. Nearly 5 times as many right-leaning programs as left-leaning are in the media. So where do you get your facts? What do you listen to, and what do you trust? I just since last week ran across a news source of news called 1440. Have any of you heard of it? A few people. Well, look it up. 1440 is the year in which the printing press, about then, was come into existence, and this is a site that doesn't appear to have any biases about it. Just wants to report what's facts. So yeah. It's a good source.
Yeah. At some point I wanted to say today, maybe it's a good time for me to say it now, I don't believe that we are, and I'll have to explain this when I say it probably, I don't believe we are a Christian nation. That is to say, we're not necessarily founded upon Christian principles as such. Now, I do think our faith, the faith of those who put together our founding documents was important, but they were largely based on political and philosophical ideas of the time, and it is basically a secular government that we are governed by a constitution and the Bill of Rights. That being said, maybe it's one of the other things I want to do is read the First Amendment to the Constitution, just so we have that in front of us, and it's very interesting. You know this you hear it a lot, but maybe you hadn't. There's a lot packed into the First Amendment, and here's what it says. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So it tries to cover both bases there. But it continues. Or abridging the freedom of press or the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. So, I mean, that just covers a lot of ground there, that we as a nation are founded upon not the establishment of a religion, but guaranteeing the free exercise of lots of religious perspectives. They could not have known when they put that in the First Amendment how diverse that would become these many years later, but it still applies to us today. And freedom of speech and freedom of press and the right to assemble and the right to acknowledge grievances in protest movements peacefully is a part of the First Amendment of the church, of the Constitution. So what I would want to say is if we are not a Christian nation in the sense that we are a state religion and that it's the foundational document for us. The Constitution is the foundational document. We are given the freedom of speech as religious people. And in our day particularly, but in all circumstances, it is legitimate for the church to have a voice, to speak a word to the people that are in politics about what we would hope would be the values and the foundations by which we live. So I think it's legitimate for us to do that. We are competing with other voices when we do that. We're competing with other religious voices. We're competing with other perspectives within our own Christian faith of what it is like to live a life, to have a country that takes into consideration values when it makes decisions. So I think it's legitimate for us to have a voice in the marketplace to influence decisions that are made within the government officials.
So if I, as an individual, see that our current administration is intimidating the press, like intimidating 60 Minutes or CBS or other institutions, defunding NPR, I raise that in church is okay? I just did.
Yeah. Just say that again now. Is that a question?
Well, yeah, I really, I don't want to split hairs about this, but is there a difference between the church's voice? The church should speak out against things.
Yeah.
So if I see that the administration is trying to stifle CBS and 60 Minutes, can I say that in church? And is there a difference, or is this splitting hairs? Is there a difference between my saying that in the pulpit and saying that in ordinary life?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I don't want to lose my job.
No. I think there is some difference. I was a pastor here for 19 years and a pastor before that in lots of other places, lots of different settings. And I think any pastor of a church will tell you that they are cautious about what they say from the pulpit because they are aware of how controversial that is and of how many different perspectives there are out there. So I don't think we can congregations don't want a steady diet of political commentary from their preacher. I think they do expect appropriate reflections upon what the faith would say about the actions of our government. And whoever that is or wherever that is, couched within the faith tradition. It's never inappropriate for us to ask the old question, what would Jesus do? Is this the way Jesus would respond or lead in a particular circumstance? So I'm a little cautious about, just standing up every Sunday and having an opinion about anything political. I do think there are times at which things need commentary. For instance, and we'll just take a couple of things. Way back, for instance, during the time of slavery, would it have been appropriate for Christian clergy just to completely remain silent about that particular issue? It was the issue in 19th century America. Had been for a long time, should have been for a long time. But it was the political issue. And Christian people took different sides on that. But would it have been appropriate for the church to remain silent? In fact, it was a joint effort between secular leadership and ecclesial leadership to move toward abolition. So one would say, and that would be perhaps an extreme case, although people at the time thought that was the normal way things should be done. So it took some courage even in that time to say, we should re-examine what we're doing. This this is not consistent with the values that we have either as a nation or as people of faith. So, you know, I thought it was important years ago to begin to affirm for the full inclusion of LGBTQ people in the life of the church, and was willing to say that from the pulpit and in ecclesiological meetings and so forth. So I do think there are times in which based upon what our faith is, based on what our best understanding of the faith is, that there's a time to make a statement about where we should be going. It's our voice in the marketplace. Doesn't mean everybody will listen to it. Doesn't mean those in government will listen to it. But it's not inappropriate for us to have commentary, but not a steady diet every Sunday. Congregations, you know, won't stand for that. So I'm not a political commentator. That's not my job. My job is to call people to faithful living, and sometimes faithful living means calling into question things that are inappropriate about what we're doing as a society.
Well, you know, I've taught homiletics in both the Protestant and Roman Catholic seminary, and I would tell students that if you had a question about bringing something up or mentioning it from the pulpit, that was an answer not to do it, generally speaking. Don't pay attention to that instinct. But I confess that I don't feel that same kind of restriction in teaching. For me, I see a kind of difference between proclamation and teaching.
Yeah.
I think there are different ministries and different functions in the church because the demographics are different, the purpose is different, and so forth. And it seems to me that Jesus was a really clever guy because he could say things that really had a lot of political impact, and he never by name called out Caesar. So that's a guide there to pay attention to. And for those of you who don't know, this man, in the 19 years that he was here, set a tone for integrity and inclusivity for this church. He took a lot of hits for doing that. But it is because of the ministry of Jim Bankston that we are such an open, affirming, inclusive congregation today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's very kind, but I did think that was an important issue in which, you know, worth taking a stand on. So every pastor has to make a decision about, you know, which hill do you die on, so to speak. You know, where do you take your stand? But you can't do that. That's not your calling to be just a steady diet of political commentary when you stand up in the pulpit. So I'm pretty clear about that. And you know, there's somebody familiar with the Johnson Amendment to the tax code. It's the Johnson Amendment. Lyndon Baines Johnson, before he was president, when he was senator, introduced a bill in the Senate that would make it inappropriate for non-taxable entities, including religious entities, to either endorse or oppose particular political leaders. So in an official capacity. So the wall of separation between church and state, I think, goes back to Jefferson. But and some of you, and I realize there's lawyers in the room, probably know more about this than I do, but the Johnson Amendment to the tax code had to do with non-endorsement of political leaders, which I certainly think we should adhere to that. So
many churches don't.
Many churches don't, on both sides, on both ends of the spectrum. And you know, you can only do that when you've got a fairly monolithic congregation. And so if you've got a congregation that's all with you and you stand up and say, I support so-and-so, well, that's not very courageous on the one hand, and it's not very threatening. But we have more and more congregations that are monolithic one way or the other. And St. Paul's is not like that. And many congregations are not. So, but I just think even if everybody in this congregation thought the same way, I wouldn't do that. I would not endorse or publicly from the pulpit oppose a particular candidate.
I don't know that this is a question. It's a statement, and I would like to get your perspective on. I have, for the most part, all of my life, for the most part, there have been some exceptions, been proud of our country. And I have friends who live abroad in Canada, Switzerland. My daughter and my son-in-law is from Canada. My grandchildren were born in Canada. My son owns a home in Mexico. My daughter and her family just got back from an extended stay in France. We're not playing well in other countries right now. My son-in-law said that Canadians look at us like we've had a good, long, faithful marriage for a long time, and the United States has had an affair or been unfaithful to the trust. My oldest granddaughter, who travels and says that when she's in another country, she said, yes, I'm from the States, but I'm not crazy.
Yeah.
You know? So there's that way of identifying oneself with some sense of pride that seems to have been gone, and I lament that. I lament the image that our country has in other places. I talked to my friend in Switzerland this week in preparing for today, and he said that in Switzerland they look at us as a country on fire, not in a good way, but explosions happening all over the place and there's no consistency. So I don't know that I expect a response from you about that. I just lament the image of our country around the world.
Yeah. Well, I think that's true.
And now, after yesterday and the bombing in Iran.
Yeah. I think the message of the church always ought to be, in terms of that, is there a peaceful solution to the difficulties that we face as an international community? That ought to be our first response. We ought to always be, again, what would Jesus do? So I think Jesus would advocate for settling disputes in a peaceful manner. We live in a tough world, so we'll see how this I hate to use a phrase that sometimes President Trump used, we'll see how it plays out. But, I think you could, I've thought about this. I don't know how this will go over in here. Would you have been okay with the assassination of Adolf Hitler in early 1939 if you knew it would have prevented all the things that followed? Now, I think that's Dietrich Bonhoeffer, great theologian, well into the war, thought that was the right thing to do. So I think political decisions out there are extremely difficult, and as a church, we advocate for peaceful solutions. Just throw that out as something for you to think about. So, again, the first casualty of war is the truth. What is the truth in what's happened and why it happened in the last couple of days would be significant to know before making judgments about what happened and why.
And how can we get that truth?
Well, it's we're dependent upon people who know the truth to tell us the truth.
So how do you distinguish between patriotism and nationalism?
Did we talk about that question? Yeah.
No.
I think you might have mentioned it.
You want me to take it back?
No, it's okay. That's definitely worth discussing. Patriotism is love of country. A simple definition, I suppose. Nationalism is love of country at the exclusion of anyone else's perspective or any other country and any other, and it becomes very narrow. Patriotism our best patriotism is to call forth the living out the spirit of our founding documents. Liberty and justice for all, and all people, we would say, are created equal, and that we live in a community in which we can find common ground. Nationalism, it seems to accentuate the one against another and to build an adversarial relationship, which in the long run is not good for any of us and not a healthy patriotism, I would say. So, especially if you add the word Christian nationalism to it, it really has no place in either one of those realms of thought, either in Christian thought or in patriotic thought. So, I think it's legitimate. I do think that would be a legitimate thing to preach about from the pulpit, for instance, that Christian nationalism is not a part of our best understanding of the faith, that we're broader than that, that we understand the legitimacy of other faiths, that we understand the legitimacy of other nations, and yeah.
Where do you see signs of hope today?
Signs of hope. Well, I think I know many of you in the room were a part of the No Kings protest here in Houston. I have relatives, family members that were there. And that's in the First Amendment. That's covered in the First Amendment, to be able to gather for peaceful acknowledgement of grievances that should be addressed. So I do think the protests, as they remain peaceful, are a sign of hope. It is a sign of how else do you have a conversation in a nation without it taking some kind of public demonstration? So I look upon that as a sign of hope. It says to me that people care. It says to me that people think there's a different way that we could be doing things, and that perspective needs to be heard, and it should be received. Now, it's always hard for people in power to, process that, but it is nevertheless an important part of who we are. So, in the secular world, some people protest for secular reasons, some for religious reasons, and it gets all mixed together. But I think I take that as a sign of hope. Actually, in a free society, you should be able to do that. And if we were unable to live out the spirit of the First Amendment and assemble peaceably to offer grievances, that would not be a sign of hope. The fact that we are able to do that is a sign of hope. I think there are, you always hope that young people have a broader perspective than people in other generational settings. That may not always be true. I'm not sure if you get broader as you get older or not. Some people broaden their perspective as they get older, other people do not. But I think the fact that we're able to have conversations would be a sign of hope. If you wall off into separate camps and never have a conversation, that's not a good thing. So conversation, of which assemblies for the sake of protest is a form of conversation within the larger community, is a sign of hope, I think. And I think that there are some prophetic voices out there that say, we could be doing this a different way, is a sign of hope.
You were not able to be here a couple of weeks ago when we had the Pride event here, which is it was a great event.
Yep.
I mean, it was really good. And our state representative, Ann Johnson, who is connected to this church, was here. And she said that, just being honest with us, that the polling among I don't want to offend anybody. The polling among a certain political group is really 90% negative toward the LGBTQIA plus community.
Yeah.
And that when people in that political party are going to be running for public office coming up for the midterms, she said things are going to get really ugly and mean. And she said we need to face up to the fact that we live in very bleak, dark, hard times. That's pretty much a quote of what she said. And my statement to those of you who are gathered here is that we didn't get here overnight. Where we are is not something that happened like that. So I don't think it's realistic for us to say, oh, we'll have a meeting like this, or we'll have the anti-kink protest and everything will turn around overnight. That is not going to happen. We got here slowly. We'll probably get out of this slowly. And I would say that one of the things that we need to hang on to is the fact that there is nowhere, no circumstance where God is not. And that's one of the things that Jesus was very clear in teaching about. And in thinking about today, I don't have a whole lot of slides to put up, but I found this one about the thing that was up on the Holocaust, written on a cellar wall in Cologne, Germany, where allegedly some young person wrote, I believe in the sun even when it is not shining. I believe in love even when feeling it not. And we have to hold on to that and communicate that among each other. My fear and anxiety is that this thing gets in the way. And that more people are spending more time on this than talking to one another and reading and getting facts and sharing that around the table with people. And so that's what I would say, is that we cannot give up hope just because we live in a dark time.
Yeah, let me just add a word to that. Many of the issues out there today, there's not a Christian consensus on. And so the voice that we might share might be a different voice from what another Christian perspective might. For instance, the anti-gay movement today has some basis in religious fervor. It's not altogether that. I'm convinced there's lots of things mixed up in that. But so to offer a different voice as a Christian perspective on the inclusiveness of all people is a Christian value that needs to come from those who possess it. Not everybody as a Christian possesses that as a value. So our voice is legitimate in the marketplace of ideas within the faith community and within the larger community as well. So I do think we have a word to share there that we should not be timid about. Yeah. And we have become polarized, I think, and trying to find middle ground, you do it where you can, and you build a bridge where you can, and occasionally you'll find a place where there's an opportunity for a conversation. But if not on every issue, on some particular aspect that you can talk to someone about, someone who's extremely right-wing, has a gay grandson, well, you can talk to that person, whoever it might be. So someone who is very anti-immigrant, law and order, they crossed illegally, let's send them all back, has someone that they know in that category that they love very much. It's an opportunity for a conversation. All of us know how dependent we are upon that labor. So just on that issue, it seems to me there's lots of other ways we could be doing this.
Well, one of the issues that you raised earlier was that there was a time in Christian practice in the United States where people took different sides about the issue of race.
That's right.
And I think that we pretty well come pretty hard down on the side that racism is wrong.
Yes. Hopefully we can find some consensus within the Christian faith community to affirm that.
And yet, racism is the thing that is propelling so much of what's going on in right-wing politics.
I think that is true. It certainly appears to be true. You know, you never know exactly what's going on, but it appears that that's a big part of it. I always think that, you know, in the big picture, both sides of the political spectrum for many years went without resolving the issue of allowing people into this country for purposes of work or freedom or a new chance at life. It was convenient to let them cross illegally. And we looked the other way, both sides of the political spectrum, because it was a source of cheap labor. It was an opportunity for us to take advantage of someone without giving them the rights in return. And so we together as a nation have produced what we're dealing with today. You know, President Trump says the Biden administration allowed 21 million people into the country illegally during that 4 years. Well, you know, that is not the truth. Many people came across the border over many generations because there was no other way to come. They could not come legally. We wanted them here because they did the work that we don't want to do. And so now we are dealing with it in what seems to me a very extreme way that could be dealt with in a different way that would allow for more humanity in the process. It's a difficult, thorny issue, I understand that, but I think larger perspective on it, the more perspective and the broader you understand something, the more likely you are to come to some kind of course of action that is more reasonable. And we're not there right now.
Right. So in here last week, one of the things I said is that I think a way for us to deal with this, and this is coming from somebody, I think anybody who comes to Ordinary Life knows that this is a progressive class and that I'm on the left side of things. You know, that's the side of the bed I get up on, and, you know, it's just, it's what is, and I would not say the same thing from the pulpit that I would say here.
Yeah.
I would do that. But I have this commitment, Dr. Bankston, that one of the things that has woefully gone wrong in this culture is that people who call themselves Christian are religiously and spiritually illiterate. Yeah. And I could name a certain senator from this state who quoted the Bible.
That narrows it down.
That
narrows it down. To
justifying the bombing of Palestine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is not what the Bible says at all.
Yeah.
So we're religiously and biblically illiterate, so I've got a commitment to want to change that in my teaching, and that's one of the things I'm doing by teaching through one of the Jesus narratives. But I really do believe, and I'm going to sound evangelical and conservative, but if we double down on Jesus, a lot of our problems would resolve, because what Jesus was interested in was empowering people, particularly people who didn't have power. And I think that's one of the things that the church needs to put its energy and interest and emphasis on, is those who are dispossessed. And that is certainly at odds with the current administration.
Yeah. Yeah. I would like to hope that my political beliefs are formed and shaped by my faith rather than the other way around.
Amen.
And so the deeper our understanding of our faith is, the more compassionate and responsible our political decisions should be. So that a more shallow understanding of the faith can justify just about anything. So, yeah, I do think we ought to encourage plumbing the depths of our faith, always referring to Jesus as our guide in every matter, and we would be well suited to do that.
So I want to thank you for doing this. You got any last words you want to say? I used to tell people, and I will say this, if it were not for this man, there would be no ordinary life. So that's a fact. Yeah. And what I used to say was that if I say something in here that you like, please tell Dr. Bankston. If there's something that you don't like, tell me. And that way he would only hear the good stuff. So
Yeah. Well,
I love
need
you
to
and I'm grateful.
substitute Jeff for that now. You know, if you hear something you like,
Tell Jeff.
Don't tell me, tell Jeff.
Well, yeah, because since I retired from annual conference, I work at the pleasure or discretion or however the book of discipline has it of the senior pastor. So whatever he says do, I got to do it.
Well, I just want to affirm what you're doing here. You're so well prepared every Sunday, and you plumb the depths of every aspect that you choose to address. And we would not be the same church without this class. It provides an opportunity for people to come together and explore the best understanding of the long Christian tradition. Bill is, grounded in Tennessee Baptist, but has expanded beyond that in his thinking today, and that's a good combination, I think, to be grounded in the faith, but to be broadened by life and by a depth understanding of what the faith requires of us this day. So I appreciate what you do very, very much, and we try to emulate that to some degree in the Journeys class, which I've been teaching for the last few years now. So we got a good group in there too.
And they're here today, so
Yeah.
thank you all for being here. So I would kind of say in conclusion, don't be afraid to speak out outside of here. Speak the truth in love. Do so with clarity and charity, not with criticism and judgment. There's a difference, and one of the things I hope for out of this time today is that there is a difference between being political and partisan. I mean prophetic and partisan. And what the church's role is in this particular time is to be prophetic and to speak to those values of love and truth and inclusion and empowerment that we get from Jesus.
Yeah.
Closing word?
I think that's a good one. Don't be afraid to have a conversation. Now, you can't have a conversation with everybody, but for those places where you can find some common ground, building a relationship ever so slowly is a good thing that leads us toward some kind of common ground that will bring us all closer together at some point. So where you can find it, where you can find an opening to have a conversation that is open and honest, don't shy away from that. If it's not there, sometimes you just have to let it go. But if there's an opportunity, take that opportunity.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
See you all next week.